Long gone are the days when children lay on their bedroom floors innocently playing games that look like this. Now, 97% of teens are playing video games that look like this.
Well, let's review it anyway. Bloodborne is a critically acclaimed role-playing game from Software. The game was released in March of 2015 and currently sits at a 92 on Metacritic and is still seen by many as one of the greatest games released on the PlayStation 4. Seeing as I only bought a PS4 last year, I missed out on all the big games released in the last decade, so I've been going back and playing some of the most popular games to see how they hold up today. My overall opinion of the game is that it's good, but I couldn't help but notice some of the flaws that really lessened the experience for me. So let's take a look at the good, the bad, and everything else that Bloodborne has to offer. If you've spent any amount of time online, you'll know the one thing From Software games are known for is their steep difficulty curve and punishing gameplay. I had the advantage of cutting my teeth on Dark Souls 3 before jumping into Bloodborne, and although the two games play quite differently from one another, Dark Souls focusing more on timing attacks and waiting for openings, and Bloodborne focusing more on straight-on aggression, going from one to the other didn't take that much getting used to, and I have to commend From Software for doing that, making games that have the same core mechanics but still play so differently. My first impressions when I booted up the game for the first time were pretty positive. Yharnam has a really distinct look that sets it apart from the Souls games. You step outside the opening clinic and you get into your first real battle. This starting area of the game does a really good job of slowly building up the combat, starting with a few easy-to-kill enemies that you can take on one at a time, then ramping up the difficulty quickly as you progress. After you get through the first few beasts, you find a small mob patrolling the street with torches and pitchforks. You get through them and you're on to an even larger mob of people gathered around what looks like a werewolf burning on a cross. I have a feeling you're supposed to die a few times here to get a feeling for how to take on large groups of enemies. If you rush in and try to take them all on at once, you'll just get hit with the projectiles and then ganked by the melee hits. To me, this was a great way to open the game. It teaches you a kind of systematic aggression that you need to have in order to clear an area. It teaches you that charging in will just get you overwhelmed and killed. So you need to be smart with how you handle each area. Start with enemies who shoot projectiles, then take out the dogs and fast-moving enemies, then try to funnel the rest into somewhere that you can take them on one at a time. The level design here also does a great job of getting you interested in the world. I immediately tried to put together what was happening. The villagers look like beasts, but here they are patrolling the streets, almost as if they're the ones who are out on the hunt. They also have this scared, frantic tone when you approach them, almost as if you're a beast to them. You get through these areas, then you're on to the first boss. You get past him, go through the level again, and you're on to the second boss. Once you get past these first two bosses, the game sort of plateaus as far as difficulty and combat. Sure, the game introduces new enemies with different attacks, but the enemies aren't really that different. Most of them are just beasts that flail at you. As long as you remember to sidestep away from them, you're pretty much figured it out. It's good that the game looks really interesting and the levels are designed in a way that keeps the player moving forward, because if the game was trying to get by just on its combat and enemies alone, it would bog down the experience. I found several areas where enemies were just reskins of enemies from the beginning of the game, and the ones that are different more or less behave the same. There's not really too much to it. This is one of the main problems I have with the bosses, but I'll cover that in just a little bit. I want to cover the story next. I know that From Software games have a reputation for cryptic, difficult to navigate stories in their games, and Bloodborne is no different. In a way, I really like this method of storytelling. The way I approach any game in the Soulsborne series is I'll do my first playthrough completely blind, with no spoilers or guides to help me. Once I've beaten the game once, I'll go online and check out things that I missed and plot points that I still don't understand. I, of course, missed so much on my first playthrough, and I ended my first run of Bloodborne like this.
And so, the hunt begins again.
What the fuck is going on here? I hate this show. I hate it. I have 42 new questions and no goddamn answers. What's that big smoky creature that nobody fucking thinks about when they go to take a piss in the woods, that smoky dragon thing?
You're nigh on a beast of the field. But here you are, treading a measure with the gods.
Being so confused by the story actually made me appreciate something else about the series: the community. The esoteric nature of the story brings people together to share ideas and speculate about the meaning of items and the history of the world. I spent more time than I care to admit scouring YouTube for in-depth analysis videos, trying to piece together the rich and complex lore. Discovering the great community around these games is one of the best qualities. You can get immersed in the lore, and although it would be exhausting if every game did this, I certainly hope the creators at From Software continue this method. In a world where games are littered with 20-minute cutscenes where characters go over the same plot points again and again, it's refreshing that the people from Software put more responsibility into the player's hands to figure out the story.
Check this out. Take a look at this.
Jesus Christ,
That right there is the mail. Now let's talk about the mail. Can we talk about the mail, please, Mac? I'm dying to talk about the mail with you all day, okay?
There are, of course, a few negatives that come along with this. After my first playthrough, I went online to look at some quests that I missed and how I could have done them on my second playthrough. There were a few quests that made me go, how the hell would anyone know to do that? A good example would be the window in the Upper Cathedral ward. You have to smash it to get to an optional boss. This window comes pretty late in the game, and there isn't any other time previous to it that something is hidden behind a window or wall that's breakable. There are breakable barrels and pieces of wood that reveal secret paths and hidden items, but never any walls. I know that Dark Souls had illusionary walls, but these are scattered throughout the game, so it makes sense that players would experiment with hitting walls to see if there's anything behind them. But in Bloodborne, from what I can tell, this is the only thing that's hidden behind a breakable wall, and it left me thinking, how the hell was I supposed to know to do that? Another example of too cryptic for its own good is Master Willem in Bergenworth. I spent more time than I care to admit trying to figure out where to go after getting here. He does nothing but point at the moon and go, ugh. I tried standing at the platform, doing all kinds of emotes, doing different emotes to Willem, and nothing. I ran around, looking for an item that I needed to present to him, or I thought maybe I missed some dialogue. But no, I just needed to run off the edge. It was another, ugh, seriously? Moment in my first playthrough. Of course, these are only a few examples of quest directions not being communicated well to the player, and most of the items in Geared that I missed was because I had missed entire areas, and it made playing through the game a second time that much more enjoyable. It was during my second playthrough that I really started to notice the cracks in the game, and this came with my second encounter with the bosses. When I defeated the Nameless King in Dark Souls 3, I had this rush of endorphins. Oh my god, that was so intense. That took so much trial and error, memorizing attacks, getting the roll timing down to the exact frame of the attack, knowing I had to dodge twice but with a tiny pause to avoid the 2 consecutive attacks. But when I went up against the bosses in Bloodborne, it was just constantly circle strafing around to get behind the boss, then unloading a few attacks and then strafing around again to repeat. Gone are the strategies of memorizing attacks. Instead, you're meant to just circle around and attack when the boss isn't attacking. I've beat the game 3 times now, and even during my third playthrough, I still don't feel like I really know the bosses and their movesets. In Dark Souls, when I took a hit from the boss, I knew that I could have done something to avoid it. I dodged too late, or I dodged too early, or the wrong direction, etc. Several of the bosses in Bloodborne just feel like flailing enemies. With the 20 blood vials you can carry, it makes defeating bosses feel more like I just lasted longer, and I didn't really have to learn how to survive. I just needed to survive long enough. I never really felt that I had to get good. I just had to time when I had to use blood vials. Now, I know this has been covered in almost everyone's review of Bloodborne, but can I just say how annoying blood vials are? They're a consumable resource that you're meant to farm, but farming for items is so annoying when, in order to reset the level, you have to go through 2 loading screens. One to go to the Hunter's Dream, and then another loading screen to get back to the area you want to farm. This feels like a misstep. If you're going up against a difficult boss and you end up running out of blood vials, you want to hit an easy area where you can take out enemies quickly, reload the area, do it again until you're full of blood vials, and then you can head back to the boss. Sitting through 2 loading screens just adds to the monotony of it, and I, for the life of me, cannot understand why they would do this. Just make it so you can restart the level from the lamp. Even if it has to load, 1 loading screen is still better than 2. It seems so obvious. Now, I'm not a programmer, so maybe there's some reason they have to do this, but it's been complained about so much, you'd think there would have been a patch or something. Playing through the game, I felt that a few of the bosses were almost a joke, they were so easy. The one Reborn and the Wet Nurse being a good example. I beat the Wet Nurse on my first attempt, thinking that there had to be another phase because there's no way a boss this late in the game would be so easy. Once I got a feel for how slow the attacks were, I just played super defensively and got a few hits, backed away, and then repeated until it was dead. I thought, okay, there had to be another phase, there had to be more coming, but no, it's slain and it's over. So if I had to sum it up, I would say the main problem with the combat is that it's great when you're fighting the enemies of the level, but it's not deep enough to make the boss battles really engaging. I can think of no greater example for the shallowness of the combat than with the Hunter battles. Here you are pinned up against an opponent with the same moveset as you, the same catalog of attacks and counters, and what do they do to make it challenging? They give the opponent 10 times your health, make them do an insane amount of damage so that they can pretty much 2-hit you, and they also give them infinite stamina and infinite ammo. Some of these Hunter battles were so insanely hard, I had to look up how to cheese them just so I could beat them. Now, do I feel bad for cheesing them? No, how can I? The very idea of these battles is you against the cheese. If there was anything I would want to change, it would be these battles. Balance out the damage and the hit points to make it feel more like a PvP battle. Like, you only need to land a few hits, but getting those few hits is the challenge. I would rather see them something like that than whatever the hell they are now. So those are the things I would change with rebalancing. I want to shine a light on a mechanic that frustrated me to no end: the visceral attacks. There were so many times I would parry an enemy, set them up for a visceral attack, and my character would just do a normal R1 attack. It's no stretch to say that the odds are stacked against you in Bloodborne. With only a few hits being able to kill you, you need everything at your disposal to help you get through the levels. And personally, I think that this is unacceptable. What seemed to mess up these attacks was if I was on a different elevation than the stunned enemy, like standing on stairs or uneven terrain. This happened more times than I was able to record, but it happened enough that it became frustrating every time it did. I would think that with all the patches that have been released, this would have been fixed, but it's still pretty buggy and it's really annoying. It's now after 5 years, I feel the flaws of Bloodborne are a little more obvious. It's a shame because I love the look and the aesthetic of Bloodborne. I love searching around the levels for more secrets and more items. I love spending time online, learning more about the lore and piecing together little bits and pieces of the world. I think it's a good game, but ultimately the combat isn't as refined as people remember it. Especially now that Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro are out, there's a pretty high bar for comparison. I certainly did enjoy playing through it, even if I did have a few rage quit moments. My overall experience was positive, but I wanted to shine a light on a few of the problems I had during my 3 playthroughs. Is Bloodborne a masterpiece? Well, for story, world building, art design, level layout, yeah, absolutely. For a robust and in-depth combat system? Not really. It's a game that now, after playing it a few times, I can't really see myself wanting to come back and play it again. I got all 3 of the endings, most of the weapons and armor sets. The only thing I missed were the Chalice dungeons, and I'm not even going to cover those, they're so boring. But there aren't enough build options to make replaying the game that interesting. I would recommend the game to friends, but I think it's just going to sit in my PS4 library. I might play it again in a year if I run out of things to play, but 2020 is going to be a great year for games, so I don't really see that happening. So what are your thoughts on Bloodborne? Have you played it? What did you think? If it's been a while since you've played it, have you ever thought about replaying it? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, and I'll see you on the next one.